Hello and welcome to Unleashed. I'm your host, Will Bachman. If you go right now to umbrex.com/unleashed, you can sign up for a newsletter where I'll let you know about the next episode, give you the show notes and the transcript, and occasionally some bonus materials. I'm excited to be here today with Scott Ratliff, who is a principal at the search firm Beecher Reagan. Scott, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Will.
So, Scott, you have worked on. Why don't you just start by giving us a little overview for people that aren't familiar with it, with Beecher Reagan?
Yeah, sure. Beecher Reagan is a specialty retained executive search firm. So what our specialty is it's across three industries. We work in professional services, so think consulting, everything from big four, the strategy houses down to, some boutiques and some challenger firms. We also work within digital and technology services as well as private equity. In PE, our firm generally builds out boards. We'll place operating partners, which are typically functional specialists that sit at the fund level, as well as C-suite or senior roles within portfolio companies across different really growth functions. So broadly, that is who our firm is. As you mentioned, I'm a principal. I lead our commercial excellence, sales, and marketing practice. So across those three industries, roles that are really focused on growth are kind of the ones that fall under my mandate.
Perfect. And that's what I wanted to speak with you about. So I'm very interested to hear about these commercial roles that you help recruit into professional services firms. So tell us just about that type of role.
Yeah, so I think that the commercial leaders within professional services that we've been seeing in the market come in a couple of different forms. So, the way I would kind of classify it is maybe three groups. There's kind of your true, hunter BD people who are responsible for going out into the market, setting meetings and really driving revenue and bringing in new logos to their organization. The second would be more of a hybrid, somebody who's owning client relationships, farming large accounts, kind of, finding new lines of business within those accounts, and then also, going out and opening up new business as well. And then the third is really more of a commercial operations type of role. So somebody who comes into the organization and really sets up and builds out a sales structure, right? Identifying kind of the right, people, process, technology to build or develop a sales culture within a firm. So, those are kind of the three buckets. And what we're seeing is, depending on the size of the firm, depending where they are in their growth journey or what they're trying to accomplish, or maybe the talent that they already have in place, you'll see roles that are specific to kind of one of those verticals, or sometimes you'll have firms that are looking for somebody that can come in and play across. So be a player coach, go lead a sales team, carry a number yourself, or set up our more of a CCO type of position where you're really setting up our commercial infrastructure and our operations, while at the same time being the tip of the spear and being out in market and driving revenue. So really the specifics just depend on the different scenario that they're stepping into.
Now, I grew up at McKinsey, which doesn't really follow this model where you come in as an associate, you get promoted, and partners are the ones who are doing the client development. It's the same people who are responsible for, kind of overseeing the project. It sounds like these roles could be different. So what types of professional services firms have people who are separate from the actual delivery teams that are brought in as commercial kind of salespeople, in effect?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? So the traditional model we see in consulting is, you start as an analyst and you work your way up, and by the time you're at that manager level, you're probably shadowing the partner in terms of sales, and you're leading delivery on those engagements. And then that natural next step up to that partner level is really where you shift into being commercially wired and commercially focused. And, certainly that still exists. I mean, you mentioned McKinsey and most of the large strategy firms continue to operate that way. I think where we've seen, a spike in commercial leadership is a few different places. One is certainly in the lower middle market. So a lot of consulting firms or business services firms that have grown organically, up to a certain point, and now maybe they're taking on private equity investment, or maybe they're looking to supercharge their growth. And part of that is to say, we've kind of maxed out our, call it like relational selling through our partner and our managing director group. And now we really want an infrastructure. And that doesn't mean that you're removing partners from the sales process. A lot of times what that means is somebody's coming in to set up a sales engine, and think of rolling up, some marketing and lead generation and different things to say, I'm going to put our partner groups, our subject matter experts in front of the right people, right? And I'm going to generate more leads, more meetings, more pitch opportunities for them. And then depending on, the talent profile, walk into those meetings with them, help to close the deal, help to structure the deals. So that's a really common place where we'll see it is in those kind of high growth, emerging market, lower middle market, consulting firms. Other places is if we want to build out a new functional capability, if we want to build out a new geography, right? We're looking to grow, and this is whether you're a small firm or you're a larger one, and we need to bring somebody in who really has experience selling this sort of product. So for example, maybe it's digital transformation, maybe it's channel partnerships with big tech, maybe it's AI or cyber, bringing in a sales leader or a commercial leader who, understands, one, most importantly, how to sell services. And then, secondly, how to sell services specific to that kind of functional area. It's another way to just continue to supercharge growth, right? And walk in the door with kind of those delivery capabilities and tell the story and how they can, help their clients ultimately to achieve their goals.
Interesting. So, and when you say lower mid-market, like for these high growth firms, just without naming names of any particular firm, can you characterize it? Like what does that mean in terms of revenue, in terms of number of professionals?
Sure. I'll characterize it really broadly. So think anything from, I think you can go all the way down to, a $5 to $10 million firm who, wants to go on an organic growth journey to that $25 million number, and then potentially, leverage M&A and other things to continue to grow to there. Or I think you can look at a firm that's, 100 million to 400 million that's, looking to, again, really professionalize their commercial organization so that they can, supercharge that growth towards $1 billion.
All right. So let's talk through some of these roles a little bit. Just maybe we start with one. So the hunter / BD people. So you listed the 3 types.
Yep.
Let's start with that. So my questions, and you can kind of take them in any order, but I'm curious okay, so what is that person actually going to do day to day? So what does that look like? Are they just generate, what's their output? Is their output kind of meetings that then partners get pulled into? Are they taking the first meeting? How do these people do it? And also, what's their background? So just talk me all around this hunter BD kind of role at a $100 million, consulting firm, or a $25 million or a $10 million.
Sure. Yeah. So I think it's, let's say your first 30 days in the role, it's really going to be about understanding who are, our prospective clients, who are we targeting? So it's going to be a lot of lead generation. It's understanding, what are the companies that we should be going after? Who is the right buyer within those companies? And it's getting the data together initially so that you can have an effective and targeted kind of approach. Then from there, it's outreach, it's scheduling meetings, and hopefully if you're successful, it very quickly turns into, you've created this kind of lead generation engine, who you're calling on, who the prospective clients are, who the right people are within those clients. So being able to kind of navigate and identify that is extremely important. And then it's getting in front of those people. And if that's taking an initial call, I think a lot of times developing that relationship initially comes from that sales leader. When, if there's business that's real, or if there's an opportunity that's real, it's kind of up to that person on, do I want to bring in the partner? Do I want to bring in the subject matter expert? And look, we see different firms do this differently, right? And how they kind of compensate that hunter is dependent, right? Is the expectation to go out and to close business, and then our delivery team comes in and executes? And I think that's one version of it. And that candidate profile is going to look really different in terms of how deep they need to go in subject matter expertise. or is the role of this sales leader to generate meetings, and are they really going to be compensated or rewarded on kind of the number of at bats they're getting for their partner group? So even within that hunter, I think there's two different type of profiles. I think the ones that we see that are really successful are the ones who understand the business well enough to walk in the door and take the sales cycle from start to finish, to identify the prospect, to build a relationship, to understand what they're selling in terms of the consulting services, and to be able to close that deal and then kind of pass it off and quarterback a delivery team.
Okay. As opposed to it sounds like that's more successful than the role of being a meeting setter.
Yeah, and I should say more successful. I mean, I think I think this is specific to different businesses, mm-hmm. and how many people do you have? What is kind of your organizational structure in terms of, if you've got the delivery capabilities, you have the bandwidth within your partner group to be taking these meetings and closing these deals, then I think there's the other version of this can be extremely successful as well, which is, take what our partners do well, which is pitch our services and understand the problem statement of our potential buyers, but supercharge it with what a commercial or a sales leader does really well, which is prospect and run an engine that's constantly getting us out in front of the right people and setting more meetings. So I would be hesitant, and I know I said it, but be hesitant to say one is more effective than the other. I think it really just depends on what your business's needs are at your current stage of growth, and again, what you have currently in place from a staffing perspective and a talent perspective to say, do we have the bandwidth for our partners to really be leading sales in every meeting, or do we need somebody who can contribute in that way?
Okay. So there was a part of that you kind of went through pretty quickly, and I'd love to hear a bit more about it. So the identifying who is the right buyer, and for my listeners, a lot of our my listeners, and I think can do that. It says, depending on the person, I want to talk to the VP of strategy at a Fortune 500 firm in the healthcare industry, something like that. But the two that are a bit of a trick is how to do the outreach and how to actually schedule meetings, right? So talk to me about how one of these commercial leaders would actually do those things, and what does the firm have to have in place to enable that? I mean, that's a lot of people want to have a meeting with the VP of strategy at a Fortune 500 firm. So how are they, getting the contact info, reaching out to the person, just cold, often would just go right to spam. So how are they doing that outreach, and how do they get these meetings set up for the firm?
Yeah, well, look, that's the magic sauce of a great sales leader, right? And there's no one right answer. There's a combination of ways you can do that. So what I would say is, first, you have to have strategy, right? You're never going to want to solely rely on, to your point, cold calling or cold outreach. With that being said, that works as well. So having the right technology in place to generate really strong leads. What I've learned, through working with these people, is the success rate on cold outreach is surprisingly high when you're targeting the right person with the right service. So to say, if you're going to reach out to 10 people, and typically, the conventional sales would say one is a good response, a really successful salesperson might tell you, look, I think getting a response from 4 is a good response if the research is good, and if, what we're bringing to the table is something that's going to be helpful and useful. So I think having the right data, and there's different ways you get the right data, right? It's obviously, looking at where you've been successful in the past and being able in your cold outreach to share that story on, here's what we've done for some of your competitors, and do that in a succinct way that's going to break through. I think that's really important. There's technology that you can leverage and use for lead generation, so that you constantly have things going outbound. You constantly have marketing materials going out on LinkedIn, right? You're going to the right industry events and getting in front of the right people to tell your story. In terms of the cold outreach, that's certainly that engine can be successful when it's executed properly, right? And the folks who are the best at it, that's what they're able to do. They come in and they know how to say, this is the technology we're going to leverage. This is the CRM we're going to use to manage it. This is the cadence that we're going to, reach out at. And here's the story we're going to tell. So that's kind of the magic behind, the cold calling method. And then I think number two, and, this goes back to well, there's not 1,000 people out there who have been really, really successful selling services. And, relationships are always going to be a crucial part of doing this. So, having been in the industry, having worked, at a consulting firm in that services environment, having built up a network and being able to leverage that network to not only sell directly to them, but maybe it's the kind of 1 degree of separation. I know so and so I'm going to give him a call. We're going to catch up. We're going to have lunch, and hey, can you throw me a lead here or there? And now when you're reaching out, it's Will mentioned you in passing and that we should meet. I'd love to find 30 minutes, grab a coffee or hop on a call. That's always going to be a really successful way also. So again, the folks that are best at it, that are stepping into this role are not doing one or the other. They're doing both, right? They're setting the engine, they're pursuing cold outreach, they're getting their story out there to the right people. And they're also, leveraging their own network, their own relationships, and other creative ways that they can get in front of folks that, could be potential buyers or could introduce them to potential buyers.
Talk to me about kind of the background of these folks. You hinted at it a bit there but it sounds like it's not necessarily a former consultant, but or I'll just shut up actually and ask the question, like what is the typical background for these folks?
Yeah, so there's a few things. I mean, I think you find more of the true sales DNA in the digital and technology services space, right? And there's certain businesses that you can look for that have exceptional sales training programs. So you look early career at somebody who kind of got their start at an IBM or at a Microsoft or even at a GE or, one of these kind of large companies who really train very well in terms of that early career sales DNA. That's always really attractive. But when you're talking about hiring commercial talent into professional services, at some point in their journey, you have to see the experience where do they know how to sell services, and really being able to speak to, like, they're selling widgets, they're selling products, and they're selling services, and those are two very different sales. So where did they make that shift into selling services? Again, a lot of the, talk about the large cloud service providers, the large tech services companies, and of course, like Big Four, the large consulting firms. I mean, they have sales teams where maybe you're going to market and it is a SaaS platform that you're selling, but there's some sort of consulting engagements that you're selling on top of that, right? And so it's not often you'll find somebody in professional services, somebody in consulting whose whole career is like, I've just sold consulting. That's kind of a little bit of a unicorn profile. But if you can find somebody who has that sales base, who learned, how to sell, the mechanics of it, the technology behind it, the process that I just spoke to, and then along the way, they got into a services organization of some sort. They really started to specialize in, again, whatever it is, this functional area, and they got reps in a consolidative sale. That's really, I think, the profile you're looking for to be successful stepping into these roles.
As you are interviewing this type of candidate to vet them before you present them to your clients, how do you evaluate, Scott, how do you evaluate candidates for a sales role? What are the questions that you're asking? What are you looking for?
Yeah, a lot of times it's not rocket science. I think a great salesperson can make complicated things simple, right? And so that's really the first kind of, check the box that I'm looking at is, when I talk through, hey, what are you selling now? What are you out there, doing? Can they explain that to me in 5 minutes in a way that makes perfect sense? And to me, that's always a great place to start when you're thinking about sales talent, because it's communication skills. It's your ability to very quickly connect the dots for somebody and allow them to really understand what it is you do. So that's always the first thing is just those innate communication skills, the ability to kind of get to the point and be able to, very quickly allow me to understand exactly where they sit in their organization, exactly what they're selling and what makes them good at it. The second thing is, I want to hear you talking numbers, right? If you're a salesperson, it shouldn't be a story about, how I'm successful in this and that. It should be, look, let me get to the bottom line. Here's what I've sold. Here's the revenue target I hit. Here's the percentage over that target that I've been in the last year. Here's what my team's responsible for. And here's, how much of that we've done in the last couple of years. So those are two things right off the bat that I always look for is, are they talking in numbers? And, are they making things simple? And are they able to help me to understand their business and their process very quickly and easily? And, I find that, that generally, leads me to the right people if I kind of follow that model.
What's the typical compensation range for these folks, and how is it typically structured?
Yeah. So different models. Again, I think, typically, you think of compensation range for, let's call them your kind of high potential, maybe earlier in their career. So I'm thinking this is all very general, right? But maybe somebody in their late 20s or their early 30s has that right experience, isn't going to come in at kind of a C-suite or executive level, but a step below. You'll see compensation ranging from maybe 150,000 to 250,000, obviously dependent. And typically, the bonus opportunity can go anywhere from, 30 to 50% of that number. I think once you look at going north of 200,000 from a base perspective for a salesperson, you're starting to look at really senior salespeople, probably, capping out up in the 350 to 400,000 would be the really high end of kind of that base, right? And then generally, there's on target bonus, which could be 50% for those senior folks, or, it could be tied to the revenue, right? So it could be 5% of revenue sold. Again, just depending on what the expectations are for that person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you see it take? How long does it take for people to be effective, and what are some things that firms can do to make sure that the person is set up for success?
Yeah, so it varies. I think the way you can decrease the ramp time is to hire the right person. I think sometimes, right, you're gonna take a flyer on somebody who has the right DNA. Maybe they haven't sold exactly what you're selling, and it isn't to say that that's not the right decision, because sometimes it is. But your expectation level for that person who's stepping into the business to basically go from cold leads, they haven't, none of the clients they've sold to in the past are going to be the right people, or none of the services they've sold are going to exactly match what they're selling now. I think you should expect a quarter, maybe two, for them to really ramp and start to hit their numbers. And we see firms that we work with will do that. They'll guarantee bonus for quarter one, and maybe it's a slightly reduced number for quarter two. And then they're going to hit the ground running by quarter three and quarter four of their first year. And I think that's a really smart strategy in terms of attracting talent, because that's one of the questions, Will, that I get the most from my candidates is, hey, I think this is an awesome opportunity. I see it, but what's going to convince me to walk away, where I currently am, where I've got a bunch of recurring business and I've got these existing relationships, and I know it's going to take me time. So am I supposed to just take that hit financially for the first 6 months while I kind of rebuild what I've already built here? So when firms look to incentivize or to help that ramp period, they can be really successful. I would say in terms of having somebody that's ready to walk in the door and hit those numbers right away, you're really looking for someone who, can bring existing relationships with buyers that are a fit, right? So again, you're talking about more of that senior profile who has those C-suite relationships, if it's, sub-billion clients or heads of business units at the large companies, where, they're going to walk over, and they're going to walk over with that black book of people, and those people are the right buyers for what you're selling. Mm-hmm. And, those situations, I think you can generally expect very, very quick progress and ramp time to hit their numbers.
If a firm is going to bring someone in at 150 to 250,000 base, it probably makes sense to take some more administrative pieces off that person's plate. what do you recommend if you're going to hire someone at that level? What do you recommend in terms of support team?
Yeah, again, I think it depends on what the expectations are in terms of the numbers that they're going to hit. But what I think I've typically would recommend, or what you would see to be successful, is certainly you need to build a commercial team around them, and that could mean different things. That could mean you have probably somebody that handles the marketing piece, right? That getting us out at the right events, leveraging LinkedIn, these different things to kind of generate leads through marketing. I think you generally have somebody on that team who's responsible for research, right? So, making sure that the data is strong, making sure that friendlies of the firms are getting hit with the newsletter, and that the firm is staying out in front of prospective clients, and that way making sure that new leads are clean and organized so campaigns can go out. So having somebody that's a research person is I think going to be important. And look, I think again, a lot of these firms, you're not going to have a huge kind of commercial function. So I don't think it's also unreasonable to say, when you're a professional services firm and you're bringing somebody in to lead sales, that number is a team number, right? And so if you're an independent contributor and your job is to just go out, be in meetings, hunt business, close deals, yes, I think you need that team around you. If your job is to come in and really stand up the commercial organization, and this goes back to where we started, Will, which is there's different definitions of these roles, then part of that on-ramp, part of that first 30 days, 60 days should be to identify what is the right setup of this team, who are the people we need. And I always, there look for scrappiness. I mean, how can we make the most out of what we have? Can we use, marginal or a fraction of people's time to help support in certain areas of the sales process? And I'm going to be the one who leads it. I'm going to be the tip of the spear. I'm going to make sure this engine runs while I'm also, filling my calendar with calls and getting out there and closing business.
Let's talk about the commercial organization. So let's say a consulting firm or professional service firm of, call it $100 million revenue firm. What would you sketch out as kind of a typical commercial organization? What are the different roles, and how many people? What are the different roles? What's it?
Yeah. So look, I think when you're talking about $100 million in revenue, I think first and foremost you're talking about multiple sales leaders. So again, at different levels of seniority, but probably you have, let's call it 5 folks who are salespeople, right? Who are sending outreach, scheduling meetings, and then taking those meetings along with, again, anybody that they want or need to pull in from the delivery side to them. So I think of that group as being, really, really important there. I think potentially you have a CRM technician of some sort, right? So maybe you're using Salesforce and you have somebody who's really managing that and building the capabilities on Salesforce out in the right way, making sure that everything there is being tracked, that we're pulling the data from it and creating kind of the right dashboards to look at, hey, what is our, what are we forecasting for this year? What do we expect coming in? Where are our different opportunities kind of in the pipeline, early stage, moving to kind of the negotiating and obviously to the closing? So that's probably one person who's a Salesforce technician in that way. Again, I think there's probably research capabilities. I've seen this augmented with, again, you could potentially take analysts on the delivery team, and it's a great way to, take part of their time as, hey, lead generation, help research and build lists that we're going to reach, that we can target. It's a great way for younger talent to really learn the business and the industry and who are the players and who are the competitors and who are the buyers. Now they're going to need to be led obviously by kind of your sales leader or your chief commercial officer to give them some direction there. But I think having 1 or 2 folks who are using, some percentage of their time on research is going to be really important. And then again, probably 1 person on marketing, right? Somebody who's kind of leading that events piece. A lot of times, the website development, that sort of stuff is going to come from the marketing group and the LinkedIn and, all the different ways that that your brand is showing publicly.
The research capabilities, say a little bit more about, in a more detailed view, what are those people doing? Are they going on LinkedIn all day and finding people, or
so there's different there's different versions of this, and I think again, some of your lower level, maybe more, I should say lower level, your more junior sales team members are also going to be a huge part of research. But yes, you're utilizing tools, right? So there's technology, there's Sales Navigator from LinkedIn, right? So that's a great tool that somebody can use to build lists. And different businesses have, it's some businesses, there might be 300, 500, really good targets for them. So that's going to be a different research capability than another business who, again, maybe is in the digital and tech space, who really can target anybody and everybody in terms of large enterprises down to lower middle market companies. So who is your audience will impact how large your research function should be. But you're exactly right. It's leveraging existing technology that gives you lead generation, whether that's LinkedIn or other programs, and then combing through it and making sure, we're looking at the right people, that we have the right buyers, that we're segmenting them correctly for cold outreach so that we can have really targeted messaging when we send it. And that takes people to go through that data and to group it correctly and to make sure we have the right story.
So we talked a bit about compensation for this sales leader role. Let's talk a little bit about what a firm that's going to hire one of these people might expect in terms of output. And perhaps you could talk about some process metrics, like let's say you hire one of these folks at 200,000 base and some bonus. And obviously they have to ramp up a bit, but once they're kind of hitting steady state, how many meetings are they getting with new logos each week? How much revenue might they add to a firm? Like what would be a reasonable number? You get one salesperson, like how much net new revenue are they adding?
Yeah, and so again, to approach it generally, but I think if you're bringing in a salesperson at that at the higher, more senior level, so at that 200 plus base, your hope is that they're carrying a number that's that's in the millions, right? So it's maybe if you're coming in and you're on a $200,000 or $225,000 base, and your goal is to hit an on target earnings in the fours and hopefully up above the fives. Once you really get up and running, you're thinking about carrying a number of 3 million or 4 million at that rate. And I think that's kind of the reasonable expectation in terms of that breakdown. If you're earning 225 and you're earning 450 OTE, you should be generating 3 million plus in revenue for the business.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, you'd have to support, to justify
right.
yourself, right?
That's right.
To generate enough margin to support yourself. What about just meetings? Like, let's say some earlier process metrics before all that revenue starts coming through. Like, maybe, I suppose it varies depending on the size of the deal and the industry and stuff, but what would be kind of a typical number that you'd expect if someone is in that, 150,000 base? Like, they're hired as a commercial leader. Are they meeting, they getting 2 new meetings per week? Are they getting 20? Like, what would be a normal thing?
Yeah. So again, it's going to be unique to the business. It's going to be unique to what, how large is the audience for what you're selling. And I think so it's going to vary, I would almost say greatly, depending on that and depending on deal size. And when you talk about a $3 million number for that person, are they getting to 3 million by, selling a bunch of $50,000 deals? And if that's the case, I mean, yeah, I think you're looking for 10 meetings a week, 10 or 15 conversations a week once they're really up and humming, that they're getting on, knowing that, when you're talking deal size and you're talking that volume, they're not all going to hit, right? But if you're going out and you're selling the $1 million deals, the $2 million deals, or you're farming accounts and existing relationships, then the number of meetings potentially decreases. I mean, I still think you're hopefully in double digits, certainly, no matter what, once you're really up and running. But then some of your time also is going to be segmented right back to the research side and making sure it's set up. So yeah, I think 20 meetings, I think 10 meetings, and it really depends on what is it you're selling, what is the deal size, and what is the volume expectation to get to your number.
What other questions should a professional service firm be asking if they're thinking about taking this step? Let's say that they've grown and maybe it's more than just the founder. There's a founder plus a couple of partners who are out there delivering work but also selling work, and they're thinking about taking this step. what questions should they ask themselves before they hire a sales leader?
Do we have the capability and the capacity within our current organization to handle a downturn, to be agile in terms of our offerings and how we're approaching the market? And what I mean by that, and I think that part of the reason, Will, that we've seen really a spike in these roles this year is, most of these consulting partner groups, you have your fastball, you have your relationship, kind of what you've gone out and sold, and you have that recurring business that comes from where from companies you've worked with and been successful. But what happens when, the market takes a turn, when something changes inside of your organization and we say, okay, we need to be scrappy here. We need to either build out new capabilities. We need to serve a different market, with our same product. Are you prepared to go out and build your business in that way? And I think that's where, when you bring in a sales leader, what you're doing is you're adding horsepower to what you guys do best, and continuing to go out and sell your fastball, but also to be thoughtful about identifying different markets, different levers that we can pull, or different products that we can take to the market, so that we're not all in kind of one area, and so that we could handle a downturn, or we could handle rapid change within our environment. And if that's something that is important, I think it's not only can be a huge driver of growth, but I also think it can be really important to continue to function and continue to grow through really challenging and changing times. And that's what the best sales leaders are going to be able to bring. They're going to look creatively at your business and say, on top of continuing to do what we're great at, I think I can sell this in these different places as well, and then we can hire against that.
In terms of the incentive compensation for this commercial leaders, what are the different ways that you see it structured? And do you have any point of view on, like, how long of a tail do you give someone? So if they bring in a new logo, did they get kind of a percentage of that forever, or just for the first year? And what if other partners helped, like, expand it to a different business unit within that logo? So talk to me about how you think about, like, just how different firms have solved this.
Yeah, and it's again, I think this is something where there's multiple different ways to do it and to be successful. So, you've got some firms that, once you've opened up that logo, that logo belongs to you. I think typically the way you described it is probably the industry standard in terms of, if you're not a delivery partner and you've just passed off that relationship at a certain point, that income's going to go elsewhere, but you certainly can go into that business and continue to farm and continue to expand on that account. So there's different models, right, for how you can build out that strategy of how long that new logo really belongs to the salesperson, and how much of that gets shared with then the partner who's delivering the work, which is obviously leading to the recurring business. And then there's other models and that are at work. And again, I think typically you're going to see this in higher volume. You're going to see this in maybe slightly less consolidative sales, where, it's going to be a percentage of the revenue generated, and then, that's it. And really you're going to move very quickly into new accounts, and that account is going to become owned by, the delivery partner that you passed it off to. So I would hesitate to say there's one right way. I would encourage leaders to just look at their business and within their kind of, financial group, what is going to make the most sense for us. And then, what a firm like ours can do is can help you think through, based on the model and the approach that you want to take for your business, what is the right talent profile to go out and bring in? What's the right background? What are the right kind of key motivators? Because it's going to be different depending on, your expectations. Are they bringing in these big relationships and then continuing to own those relationships and farm those accounts? And maybe you have a salesperson who's, carrying a $30 million number off of 2 accounts. And most of what he or she is spending their time doing is, maintaining those relationships and then continuing to dig into those businesses and those large accounts and figure out different ways you can help. That's very different than somebody who, hey, we need 15, 20, 30 new logos that's going to buy up our software. And, it's not going to be as consultative. It's not going to be as long-term of a relationship. It's going to be a leave behind, and how you incentivize and structure that salesperson is going to look different.
Any parting thoughts on questions I should have asked you about this topic?
No, look, I appreciate the conversation and the questions, and I think again, probably the most poignant thing that I would say when you're going out into the market for sales talent is, to pay attention to that core DNA. I think the best salespeople that I've come across, it really comes down to that competitive spirit. It comes down to, being motivated, being commercially motivated, right? And having that be a driver of how they view their own success and how they get fulfillment through their work, and then having really strong communication skills and really good interpersonal skills and a sense of people. And if you're testing for those things and they check those boxes, and the experience of, hey, I've sold services and I understand your guys' product set, I think you can feel really comfortable about the value that bringing a sales leader into a professional services organization can bring.
Amazing. Scott, why don't you, let's share some links. Where can people find Beecher Reagan online? Where can people find you if they wanted to follow up?
Yeah, of course. So, Beecher Reagan, just www.beecherreagan.com, can use the website and certainly reach out to us. And, I'm on LinkedIn and Scott Ratliff, and always looking to connect and meet great people. So appreciate you, Will, for giving us this platform, and look forward to hopefully connecting again going forward.
Excellent. Okay, we will include those links in the show notes. Scott, thank you so much for joining today. This is a great discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you.